There we go. Well, everybody, welcome to our 5,000th podcast. I don't know, six or seven,
I
something
think
like
it's
that.
number seven. I
Number
think,
seven. Yeah,
maybe. I don't
I
know.
think so. And I believe you have a topic for us, Mary Beth, in general.
Oh, yes. First of all, before we do that, though, I just want to apologize because we were supposed to have our podcast last week, and people line up for this, thousands of people. But this is the night of, we were supposed to have it on the 5th. We were going to record it. And the night of the 4th of July actually was in the wee hours of the 5th. A hurricane, well, near hurricane came right through here. And I woke up in the middle of the night and I thought, what is that? Is that fireworks? And it was rain. And I've never seen it rain that hard, but it was so windy. I opened my little slider out to my deck where I have furniture. I have chairs and an umbrella and an indoor outdoor carpeting out there. Everything was moving on its own. I was like, ah, it was like the Twister movie. So, and then we lost power and for a day, but internet connectivity for days and days. So that was really upsetting. So I'm glad everything's back to, you know, normal now. So the topic we were going to talk about today was about how, and you can reframe this if I don't say it the right way, but um, how our beautiful sweethearts feel when they cross over. Because we talk a lot about how we feel or felt when that happened and how devastating and horrifying it was for us and the deep grief that we experienced and all the pain and the just I don't even have words for how awful it was. But what did they feel? And different people have different ideas of what happens when people in general cross over and what happens when our sweethearts cross over. And sometimes people in our group have talked about the fact that they get messages, for example, from mediums who say, well, they had to move on, or they hang. Here's another popular one, typical one, is they say, well, they hang around for a little while, but then they're on their way. They have other things to think about. That's one scenario. And then other people have said that they feel that their partners are, quite sad and upset about their passing and or not so much about their passing, but about seeing their spouse or partner in such grief. And they try very hard to console them or comfort them or send them signs or do whatever, but sometimes those messages are lost in the sauce and it's upsetting for them. So that's what we were going to talk about today.
Yeah. And so this is kind of been an evolution over the past 8 years of the group because basically Mary Beth and I only had, you know,
William and
each.
I. The group started out with two people
Yeah.
and we just looked at each other.
And we only had our experiences and our views to draw from. Basically, we've read about other stuff, but no, no real contact with other people directly in our situation, doing what we're doing and continuing this relationship and how they feel and the information they've gathered. And I think that as has gone by, it's been a learning process for us that, our experiences and both with our partners before they died, the death process, uh, and what came afterward. Our experiences represent just a very tiny,
Yes.
a very tiny fraction of the type of experiences that people report. And so that's been a big learning process for us. And I think that, you know, where we're beginning here about the idea that our partners who died can be in pain and they can experience suffering in the afterlife, uh, particularly around having to observe us and see us in serious pain. and in serious grief. And we've also had information that that some have regrets, and some want to like I don't know make good on past mistakes and past failures of theirs, which is perfectly understandable. And I think that for me, it's been a process of I think I began all of this in as much as I try to have always tried to throw off what other people say and what figures of authority say and uh, all that. I still started with some assumptions about what it would be like for somebody who died. I just had these assumptions, and I think the more I hear about it, the more I have come around to the idea that our people over there are just a lot more human and human like with the full repository of emotional experience that we have here. And so, I've expanded my view considerably that uh, it's not like the information before was like started off was like, well, they're basically done with this world. They're done with you. They're done with this world. Get used to it. they, they don't care about, they don't care about you anymore, or they're trying to move on or whatever. And I was like, I mean, I never really accepted that, but then got to the point where it was like they're not feeling bad about the you know the end of your relationship, or they're not feeling bad because you're sad or whatever. And I just come to reject that now. I think it's fully possible. I think it's real. I think it's fully real that our partners can feel sad, very sad, and very have all of the full emotions, about maybe some things they failed at in their life here with us, and things they wish they could have done better, things they want to apologize, things they regret. And they certainly, in my view, they certainly don't like not being here to physically console us and love us as we go through our, daily life here. What do you think, Mary Beth?
Well, from the beginning, in the very beginning, like really the beginning, not long after Paul passed, I had found my way to Patrick Matthews, and everybody who knows me knows that I really appreciate Patrick's mediumship and his point of view, and I gobbled up all his books, and I had a reading with him. And one of the first things he said was that Paul was feeling fine, but he missed the physical connection he has with me. And that was okay with me. In other words, that made sense to me. And it was sweet, like I don't want Paul to be suffering. I don't want, and the other thing for me, this is just my story. The other thing for me is that, they're privy to our thoughts. And Paul knew that right from he first of all, he knew I was a fan of Abraham before he died. I actually took Paul, who was not metaphysically focused, to an Abraham Hicks workshop. And after the workshop, I said to him, "What did you think of it?" And he said, "Well, they didn't say anything I disagreed with." And when Paul was going through his cancer journey, he knew that I often listened to Abraham just to, kind of get myself through that, because that was a different type of horror, the whole cancer journey. Um, so Abraham says that they feel fine. And the better you feel, the easier it is for you to feel them with you, because then you're on the same wavelength. And so, knowing that Paul was privy to my thoughts, he knew that I was, super focused on feeling as good as I could so that I could feel him with me. And of course, I imagine that, I don't know, but of course, I imagine that, it wasn't fun for him to watch me in agony. But he also knew that we would be together again. They have that advantage of knowing 1000% that we'll be together again. And he knew that I was, for him, out of my love and devotion to him, that I was working on helping myself feel better. So it made me feel better not to think, or to think that, sorry about that, it made me feel better to think that Paul was okay and not suffering the way I was. That made me feel better. That whole thing made me feel better. However, I will say, that coupled with the perspective of Abraham, coupled with my other go-to, which was when I found my way to the Nanjis, Annie Nanji. Annie Nanji was feeling wonderful. It was her husband on earth who was suffering, and she was constantly trying to comfort him and tell him that they would be together again and it would be okay and please don't be sad. And so she was in good shape, and Patrick Matthews told me that Paul was in good shape. And the third thing that happened for me was that my former sister-in-law had a dream not long after Paul died, and it was a very real. She said that she saw Paul solid and real, and uh, she's not metaphysically focused either, but she said, wow, it was like amazing. He stood before me. He didn't have any of the cancer. He was whole and healthy. And she said in the dream, I asked him, what's it like there? And he said, it's wonderful. But the only bad part is that no one can see me. So with the no one can see me thing and the I miss you physically thing, I could manage that. That was okay with me. I didn't worry about Paul being, you know, in agony. However, everybody's story, what I've learned in this journey, William, is like what you were saying, everybody's story is different. Everybody, Paul and I had the the good fortune of having a beautiful, easy romance. Really, really, really easy. Never an argument. Really, it just happened. And when he died, we knew that we were fully committed to each other. And you know what I mean? Like, in other words, there were no words unsaid. There were no things to solve after he passed. And that made it easier as well. But everybody's story is different. And some people have issues to work out. And what I've learned is that even after their partner passes, they can continue to work on their relationship and grow closer and more in love than ever before. That was a revelation to me. So, of course, some people, and people are different. People just are plain old different. And when they cross over, here's one more thing that Patrick Matthews said. He said, they're just people. They're just people, just like they were on Earth. They're just people. And so, of course, people you do hear mediums say that so and so had regrets about this, that, or the other thing. So people are still trying to work out things on the other side. And so, why not? Why there can be a complete spectrum of how people feel when they cross over. The end.
Yeah,
Your turn.
yes, I totally agree. And that's kind of the eye-opening process I think you and I both had in this group is coming to the realization that just because something was some way between you and Paul, or
Yes.
something was some way between me and Irene, that's we're not setting the standard. I mean, that's not how everybody is or should think about it or should experience. Like your path was one of, as you said, trying to make yourself feel better so that you could better interact with Paul. And
Mhm.
and I'm just assuming that that's the perfectly valid path for you and Paul because it's worked. But I
Yes.
would I would also say that feeling good is not a prerequisite for having contact, you know, serious contact with your partner or serious interaction with your partner. As our group members have told us, sometimes, a lot of times, it's in the worst grief that they feel their partner is the strongest.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's one of those things is that it doesn't invalidate somebody else's experience for somebody to have a completely different experience. All those experiences are fully available. They're individual. They're individual to relationships, and it's just a matter of accepting that. That of like you and I would hope other people just accept that we're not in competition or trying to hammer out the truth about how these things are, or how they work, or how they go, or what it means. It's just like you said, they could be completely different stories. And I mean completely different true stories. Just because the experience is different and the nature of how it progresses is different. Doesn't make one false and one true. Can both
Right.
be absolutely true. And we just want everybody in the group, to understand that and to have our know that they have our full support for however they manage and experience this. We're here to support you, not try to convince you out of things, or convince you should be doing something a different way. This is your path to figure out between you and your partner.
And I admit, when I first heard someone say, well, my partner is in grief, I thought, well, and I said, because I'm a big blabbermouth, and after every one of these meetups that you and I do, William, I think like for days after, oh, why did I say that? Why didn't I say it this way? I go over it in my head because sometimes I just, things just come out of my mouth um, that I have no control over. Anyway, though, I'm sure when I was that I've said to people, well, I would hope that Paul isn't in grief. That here's what that sounds like to them. It can sound like to them. Well, I don't know what's wrong with you that you think your partner's in grief. I mean, what, that's ridiculous. That's what that may have sounded like to them. And the last thing on earth I would ever want to do is hurt anyone's feelings or dictate how their relationship should be, for God's sake. I'm only one person too, and I'm imperfect. And, so that was, if anybody ever interpreted it that way, I apologize. That's not really what I meant. I had never heard that before, and I was just kind of incredulous, like, what? Wait a minute, no. And I don't believe Paul's in deep grief. I'm hoping he wasn't. But that doesn't mean anything. I mean, anything to anybody else is what I mean. It means something to me, and to Paul. But what we have together is what we have together. And what everybody else has with their sweethearts is just as valid. And you always say, William, that there are all these different beautiful love stories. And there's no right or wrong to to any of it.
Right. It's that's the part of the beauty of it is that they're all different love stories, and they all have different facets to them and different ways of progressing. One thing you said a long time ago, Mary Beth.
Many, many, many years ago.
Oh yeah, many many years ago was that when you and Paul first met and he broke up with you, and you said, well, yeah, I knew that if you love somebody, you want what's best for them and what they want for themselves. And I was in my mind thinking, well, screw that. I'm not that good of a person. No, I don't. I want for Irene to have whatever she wants and loves, as long as that includes me as her, you know, as her significant committed partner. I am not anywhere near so I don't know, gracious as that. And another thing, you were talking about uh, you didn't want Paul to be in any type of grief or pain. So that, and I told you here recently, well, I'm kind of two minds on that. I'm like, man, I don't really want Irene to be in grief or pain, but good God, suffer a little bit if I'm over here crying. If I'm over here balled up on the floor, sobbing my eyes out, and she's over there, la da da, drinking her ice, eating her ice cream, and watching me. It's like, no, that's not what I want.
Well, I did like that Patrick said that Paul missed the
Yeah,
physical.
yeah,
And that to me meant a lot. I mean, it meant all like, the intimacy, but also just the physical, just being able to see each other, talk to each other, touch each other. You know what I mean? The physical. And that really encompassed all of that. But yeah, I don't want I don't want Paul to be in agony. And I really think, since I already ran myself down, I'll just give myself a pat on the back. When Paul broke up with me in high school, and everybody knows this story, on our first date, he said to me, it was so sweet. He said to me, I really like you, and I want to go steady. That meant we exchanged high school rings. We were 17, so cute. And he said, but I probably will be going away to college, which was unheard of in our community. Most kids didn't even go to college at all, but he was our class valedictorian. He had big plans. And he said, I want to date a lot of people before I settle down. So I don't want you to, I'll be true to you while we're going steady, but I don't want you to count on me for forever. And I said, okay, that's okay. And I proceeded to fall in love with him. And then, months later, we had this beautiful teenage romance. And months later, he just walked me home and held out his hand, and my little high school ring was in his hand. And I looked at him, and I knew he didn't even say anything. I knew what that meant. This is the end of the road, Mary Beth. You know, I'm off to date other people. And I was crying, and he left my house. And I ran to the front window of our house, and I looked out and I saw him walking away, walking home to his house. And I remember thinking that if you love somebody unconditionally, you want for them what you want for them, what they want for themselves. And if he wanted to date other girls, I had to respect that and let him go, except I didn't really. And so I got him back 35 years later. But
Yeah,
the whole thing about recognizing that there's so many different love stories, so many different people came together in different ways. Some of the people that we've talked with, they came together, they parted. Well, Paul and I did. But even married people, they had times where they were apart, then they came together again. And all these factors help to affect how the story unwinds, how it unfolds rather. And
right.
it's really fascinating. And we've had people in our group who had, some difficulties in their relationships, and they resolve them even after. And they feel perfectly at peace and wonderful. And that's so admirable. But all of these things were new to me. You said something yesterday in our regular Zoom group, William, about the fact that, when you and Irene were both physically focused, you didn't make a habit of talking to other people about your relationship. And I thought about that. I don't think I ever talked to one person about our relationship ever until now.
Yeah, that was an interesting conversation yesterday, and a lot of that just really occurred to me then is that we place these relationships, which understandably so, as being like well outside of the norm, and yet a lot of it is really kind of normal. It's really kind of a normal relationship
Oh,
in terms.
excuse me, William. You mean the transdimensional
Yeah,
portion? Yeah.
yeah, right. Yeah, the transdimensional portion, we consider it uh, uniquely, and I'm not saying it isn't unique, but and especially in the beginning, of course, when you're learning how to manage it, it's very unique and it's very different. But a lot of the concerns I've noticed about this relationship and the way we have to go, kind of are forced to go about it, are and in our living our life here in this world while our partner is not physically present. It kind of struck me about really how similar it could actually be to a normal relationship in terms of like managing your life so that you have time to spend focusing on your partner now that they are no longer physically here. Well, that's pretty much the same kind of thing you'd have to do in a busy life in a normal relationship. Is you one person could work or both could work, and then you have all the other responsibilities, all the other things you have to do, and you have to figure out how to manage some type of time to devote to your partner. In a good relationship, you're looking for ways to find, and it's often not very long. It's often maybe an hour before you have to go to sleep, or an hour after you wake up, or 30 minutes, or being able to text each other little snippets now and then, or a little phone call here and there. It's you're basically trying to manage the same type of time constraints and logistics constraints that you would have to do in a normal relationship anyway. Find ways to not take it for granted. But it's like, I think that a lot of people in the group, myself included, I completely include myself in this, uh, felt and maybe do still feel guilty if they're not spending every possible waking free second, you know, doing something to get in better contact or to interact with their partners or talk to them. And if they're, well, did we do that normally? When they were physically here, were we consumed with the idea that I can tell you right now, Irene wouldn't have put up with that shit. I mean, if I was spending every possible second, that I could, you know, being in her face or being around her, trying to talk to her, yeah, that would not have worked out, you know.
You're not,
And
oh, I'm sorry, William. Go ahead.
no, no, go ahead.
I was going to say you're not giving yourself enough credit, though. You're saying that that you sort of made these discoveries recently as some of it is yesterday, but early on, and by early on, for people who don't know, we started this group what over 8 years ago, William.
Yeah,
Yeah, and so and it was really early on. So let's say 8 years ago or so, people were we had this discussion about what happens when the signs that your loved one gives you, and by signs we mean mostly like external signs, whatever your signs are, coins, rainbows, feathers, whatever your signs are, when they seem to begin to diminish. And that's pretty typical. It's pretty typical for the people to get a lot of signs initially. I mean, it happened to me, a lot of physical signs initially, and then it kind of tapers off. And that's when people begin to panic because they think, uh-oh, maybe they're gone. Maybe they went somewhere. And I remember you said something that was so helpful and made such sense and really redefined how I interacted with Paul. You said, well, it's a relationship. It's the transdimensional relationship is like any other relationship. It's like your relationship was before. And a good relationship is never one-sided. So instead of, looking for signs or asking for signs, you can do that. You can look for signs and ask for signs, but why not give some signs? And then we talked about the other thing I'm kind of proud of in our group is that we talked together about it, it's one thing to say, well, you know, open your heart to blah, blah, blah. But what does that really mean? We talk in very concretized terms. So you said, every morning I pour a cup of coffee for my wife. And I started doing that for Paul. That was something I could do. And it helped the grief because grief is it's a situation that you feel you can't get a handle on. How can you make it better? When something else bad happens in your life, you lose a job, you start looking for another job. Even something horrific, your house burns down, well, you start to rebuild. But no matter what you do, they're not coming back the way they were. And so you have to move forward, like it or not. And that idea of this is just a relationship the way it was, and there are things you can do to show your love to them instead of always waiting for signs or asking for signs. That was for me revolutionary. I had never heard that before. And then and so we offered all, in the ensuing weeks and months, we offered all sorts of signs. Well, you could write them a poem. You could, go on a walk and talk out loud to them. You could donate money to their favorite charity. There's a million things you can do. And in fact, one year I repeat it every year, but I put together um, a little a slide, like a Facebook slide for Valentine's Day of there must be 50 things, 50 plus things you can do to love your lover. And that was based on that notion that it's not just them sending us stuff. We can send them stuff, our love, and we can show them in very concrete ways. So that's not a new idea you came up with, William. That was there right from the start, and it helped me tremendously.
Well, thank you. Well, the thing is that like most other people, I come up with an idea, and then it's only a few months later I forget. I forget I either came up with that. I have to relearn things constantly, re-experience and relearn them. But I think that yesterday it really kind of culminated this thing in me that I had still held the afterlife and people in the afterlife as like some type of, I don't know, fundamentally different kind of existence. And I just, I don't think that anymore. I mean, just in some ways, I've been kind of chiseling away at this for some time, but as like Patrick Matthews said, it's just, they're just people. And as Jurgen Zive said, if you want to know what the afterlife is like, go outside and look around. That's what the afterlife is like. It's, and I've heard other sources say that too, is that it's really not that different. You know, I mean, it's different in certain really great ways because you don't have to worry about getting sick or getting old. And you have these, nice, youthful, energetic bodies, and apparently you can't, or it's very difficult to actually get injured. And you have access to a lot more stuff. I mean, you don't have to toil away at a job you hate, to pay your rent or your mortgage and pay your taxes. It's just, those are really great things. But other than that, it's just not a fundamentally different kind of existence. We don't become fundamentally different people or different kinds of people just because we die. And from what I've gathered with the help of this group, we have the full range of emotions. Now, the full range of human emotions. And it's not like, well, you die and you're no longer jealous, or you die and you're no longer possessive, or you die and you no longer get angry. I mean, we've had information come through that yes, they are capable of experiencing all that. Now, I'm not saying that realizing that you survived your death and that you're no longer sick and you're no longer old, and you no longer have to worry about a lot of things you worried about in this life. I'm not saying that doesn't change you. I mean, that by itself is a little changing. I mean, how could it not be? you know? So, but I think that when you, when I say change, I would say that those conditions in this world that we put on ourselves when we come here, uh, can affect our behavior here. I mean, could affect our personality, can affect our behavior. It can cause us all sorts of like mental and psychological issues and problems. And I would say that when you die, it's not really that it changes you. I think it just helps reveal who you really are. You know, after taking on this cloak of heavy psychological conditioning and all the things we have to go in this world, we're kind of free more to be who we really are in the afterlife than we were here. And one of the things that is like a little note of that to me is that when it became really clear, that Irene wasn't going to make it, when she was just beaten down and ill and sick or whatever, I've never seen her act more free and innocent. It's like she knew that all of this stuff was going to be gone. All of these worries and concerns and problems, her health issues, her frail body was going to be gone. And she was just like, I've never seen her behave like that. And it was just a marvel, a joyful marvel to behold how free and innocent and, I mean, just carefree that she was. It was beautiful. What do you think?
Well, I can add to that when, Paul had terminal pancreatic cancer that had, by the time it was diagnosed, had already metastasized to his lungs. So, and it was inoperable. So that's pretty much, a death sentence. But we didn't live like it was. And in the very beginning of his diagnosis, I remember Paul said, well, I'm going to beat this thing. And I never argued with him about whatever he thought about, whatever he felt about. I felt like, I was there to love and support him, and whatever he felt was best for his own situation, I would support, even if I might have done some things differently. And so we went through the whole thing, the whole cancer journey. And there were times that were good, and there were times where he was, very, very near death, and then he'd rally. It's such a roller coaster. But right before he died, he said to me, it was so sweet. He said, I don't want to hurt your feelings, but I'm not afraid to die. And he just seemed, I don't mean to like cave in or anything, but like you said, William, he just seemed okay with it. Oh,
At peace.
at peace. Yes, at peace. And this is not about Paul, but I was living in Michigan with Paul at the time, and when he passed, and after he died, as part of my feel good plan, I joined Toastmasters, a speaking group, because I like to speak. It's a practice speaking group where everybody's very supportive. And I met a man in that group named Tom, and Tom was older, and he and I became fast friends. And his wife, Tom's and his wife would have me over to the house for dinner. We all became friends, but I was mostly friends with Tom. And a year ago, Tom was older and he was experiencing some heart trouble and was in the hospital. And I was set to go on a cruise with Abraham. And I called him. I had heard that he wasn't doing well in the hospital. And I talked to him, and he said to me, Tom said to me, the doctor said I'm not going to make it. And I said, oh, Tom, because I really, really love Tom. The reason we bonded was because he was interested in the afterlife, and we would exchange books, and, I would give speeches about the afterlife. And so we had that big thing in connection, in common, and we talked about it all the time. And so Tom said, the doctor said I'm not going to make it. And I said, oh, Tom. He said, no, I'm good. I'm okay with it. I'm fine with it. And I told it after he passed, I talked to his wife and I said he was okay with it. And he hadn't told her that. I don't know what the circumstances. I wasn't there at his hospital bed or anything like that. But that kind of surprised me when Tom said that. He said, I'm okay with it, Mary Beth. And he said, we've talked about this enough to know that this is not the end. And that was so heartening to me, both what Paul said that and somebody in our group at one point said something to me like, well, yeah, but you and Paul, you had all this metaphysical stuff hammered out ahead of time. But Paul wasn't metaphysical. He thought dead was dead. Dead is dead, he said. But right before he died, when he said that about I'm not afraid to die, I said, well, when you go, will you send me signs that you're there and you're okay? He said, if I can, I will. And I said, when it's my turn to go, will you send me signs? Or I'm sorry, will you greet me? When it's my turn to go, will you greet me? And he said, if I can, I will. And that was the extent of our metaphysical talk. But that was enough for me because
Yeah.
it was him respecting my views on things and saying, if it turns out you're right, Mary Beth, I'm right there for you. So I do think that I was reading in that book I was talking about, Life After Death by Neville Randall, that one of the voices uh, in the Leslie Flint tapes, he said, "You don't." This is a dead person speaking in seance. You don't understand. Death is the most wonderful thing that could possibly happen to a person. It's wonderful over here. And so yeah, so that's what I tend to think about. But again, that doesn't negate the fact that some people don't have this, like jumping up and down kind of feeling when they pass it. Abraham says you come into the fullness of who you are. So
Yeah. That's what, Jurgen says the same thing. He says, when you die, your inner world becomes your outer world.
yes,
Yeah. And so, yeah, I love that. And I love how that is expressed from so many different sources, and especially from the dead themselves. And to me, that's the source of the common saying that there is no death. That I mean, people, and I'm not saying that this is true for everybody in every situation, and true for everybody who crosses over, but it is very, very common in what accounts we do have from dead people. That it's not like some big traumatic or dramatic deal. It's just, you know, going about your daily life or whatever situation, and then the next thing you know, you're somewhere else, Or even, or some people, it's like the next thing they know, they're looking down at their dead body, and then shortly thereafter, the scene either changes or somebody comes along and takes them along to a different scene, and the scene different changes, and they're just somewhere else. And it's not like a huge dramatic major event. And you were talking about the ways. I want to get back to the ways that we show our partners, and I think there's been a real heavy during the course of this group over the years. It began with and can still have some. It kind of has always tended to lean towards big effort. Okay, like like you have like I know that in the beginning it's perfectly natural to just put all of your effort and all of your attention in finding this. How could that not happen? All of this effort and all this attention, trying all these different things, all these different methods, and being determined to achieve certain results. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's the first thing I want to say. There's nothing wrong with doing that kind of thing. But I also want to give complete validation and support for the little things, and the little things like you were talking about, pouring a cup of coffee for them, even if it's just while you're, getting dressed or taking a shower, just sending them a thought. I love you. That's all. That's all. If what would that feel like to you if when they were still physically focused, you're in there taking a shower and they pop their head in and say, I love you, right? It's great. It's wonderful. It's beautiful. And that's really a lot of our daily life with our physical partners was just little things. It was just the little things that you did that you were just like in the habit of doing, even if it was just saying I love you, you know, or have I told you lately how much I love your hair? Have I told you lately how much I love it when you hold my hand, or sit on my lap or whatever? It's like it's just little expressions that don't take any effort at all. Just no effort at all are in my view just as significant and just as meaningful and just as powerful when it comes to uh, managing these relationships going forward. you know and it's to me they're very beautiful and they're very sweet. You're just showing them that you've got them on their mind, that you still love them, uh, that you still need them, that you're appreciative for anything that they have even tried to do, even if you didn't see it, or I'm always telling Irene how grateful I am to her for her
Yes.
efforts, whether I see the sign or not, and whether I, feel the sensation or not, it doesn't matter. I just appreciate, I know that she's trying, and I appreciate that. But also, if I just get a stray thought, that seems like her saying, I love you, I'm here with you. That's awesome. That's all it really took, in the course of most of our physical experience together here in this world. That's all it really took to keep the connection and the love and all of that alive and moving forward and fresh. And so I want to, if I can, like I said, I'm not saying you shouldn't, or it's not a good idea, or I'm not saying that you won't get to the point where you can freely astral project anytime you want with your partner through your efforts. Man, if you could do that, that would be great. Just let us know.
Yeah.
That would be so wonderful, to hear. I love hearing the stories that we have from people about their communications with their partners and how clearly if their efforts are paying off. I love to hear all that stuff. But I also want to make sure that people know that just if all you can manage is just crawling through this life, barely holding on, if and you've got so much work to do, and you've got so much stuff you have to interact with other people about, and basically all you're doing is just crawling through with an occasional sign here and there, and an occasional, I love you back and forth, and then the occasional 5 or 10 minutes of, just carving it out for your partner is it's still good. It's still all good. You're still going to get the prize at the end. You're still going to get eventually. You're still going to get. I'll just say it bluntly. Eventually, you're going to die, and you're going to be with your partner. It doesn't matter if you suffered through the whole process. It doesn't matter if you manage to get to a very happy place, and it doesn't really matter even if you have hundreds of astral projections. Eventually, everybody gets to be with their partner, permanently on a full-time basis, and it's wonderful. So don't, what I'm trying to say is don't beat yourself up for it. If you have only a very tiny amount of time that you can do it and you're exhausted most of the time, or you're frazzled a lot of the time, or even if you have, the roller coaster, which we've talked about, highs and lows and highs and lows, and, you're good 1 minute and the next minute you're crashed out. It's all still good. It's not any type of statement about the nature of love the nature of your love, the nature of your effort, the nature of those are not statements. This world is hard to get through, and so any way you can do that, I admire you. I admire you.
One of the very easiest, excuse me, one of the very easiest things I do, and I do it practically every day, is I'm not that disciplined. I would love to say, at 8 a.m. every day I do this ritual, and I try, but my whole life I've never been able to stick to that. Anyway, though, one of the things I do that's what I call a while you're at it kind of thing. You're doing something else, but you can do this. And it's usually when I'm in the car, but I live alone except with Invisible Paul, but no other humans in my house. So I do have that advantage. But um, when I'm in the car and if I put a CD on or whatever, is I just sing my own lyrics to the songs. Or I just got this thought just now. Paul and I, every night, we love to, when he was physically focused, and now we love to watch Jeopardy. And just now I got the thought of, the Jeopardy, da, 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 da. So I would sing, I could sing. I never did this, but I guess I will. I love Paul Mank, yes, I do. He is my eternal sweetheart. Isn't that great? It makes me feel good. I'm sure he's laughing his head off. I'm sure anybody listening to this is laughing their head off. I'm sorry I subjected you to my voice. But I always find that when I sing my own lyrics, I just make up my own lyrics to these songs. I always like, I laugh. I laugh. I'm sure Paul's laughing. And it just is uplifting and it's easy. And I can do it if I'm in the car on the way somewhere, something like that. Takes like no time at all.
Yeah, that's a perfect example of another thing is that this doesn't have to be a heavy journey, right? It doesn't have to be serious, heavy, uh, melancholy, uh, or even bittersweet. I'm not saying you'll never experience those things, but man, there's a lot of fun in this. There's just a lot of fun, and that you can have a lot of magical fun that you can have with your partner. And one of the things that consistently comes up, like when we talk about how much time we have during the day to be with our partners as we go about our busy day. I mean, the fact of the matter is that in this relationship, we have much more time to be with our partners because they're always with us.
Yes.
It's not like you have to leave them at home or they have to go off to work and you're apart all day or they go off someplace for a week to do a job and come back or take care of some kids or something and come back. They're always with us. And as you say, they're just a thought away. So it's like having your person in your pocket all day long. You've got your pocket person with you all day long that you can always make a sarcastic comment or always imagine, you know, slapping the face of some rude person in front of you, or like I have said on occasion. All right, Irene, go hop this son of a bitch, you know, go poltergeist them. There's also a lot of humor and a lot of lightness and a lot of fun that you can have in this experience. I mean, I don't know about other people's experience, but not, an enormous portion of Irene and my relationship here was just fun, was just having fun and laughing, making little comments to each other, giving each other a look, or whatever that would make each other laugh. You know how it is, Mary Beth. I come up with a dad joke and Irene would just like, have this look on her face and roll her eyes. It
I
was,
remember, I remember one time Paul was in the hospital in the beginning, and he was having these tests to see. At one point, they told us in the very beginning, there's different types of pancreatic cancer, and even though that sounds awful, there could be a type that's long term, that he could live with it for years. And so he was in the hospital getting the test to see if he had this, preferable type of cancer. And this healthcare worker came in and she was putting leads on his chest, I guess like taking what, an echocardiogram or something. And she come and I was with him. They let me stay with him, and he was in the bed, and I was there. And the woman comes in and she takes the apparatus out of a case, and it's all the leads dangling off. And she went like this. She said, "Wait, where do these go again?" And Paul and I were like, "Oh my God." Now, maybe she was kidding around. I don't know, but I don't know her. I didn't know if it was her first day on the job, but I remember Paul and I exchanged looks like, holy heck, who is she? Get somebody in who knows what they're doing. And so even in that really tense time, we just would laugh our heads off about a lot of stuff.
yeah, and I think that's really something that can often get lost, especially in the beginning, is that type of interaction and that type of thought. And it can be very difficult to regain uh, that sense of fun and humor. And I think that the more that you can regain that uh, and weave it into your sense of a normal relationship that you're having with your partner, because one of the great things about it is that it takes really no effort at all to for me to like shoot Irene a thought, because she's just right there, and some of it's really fun because she's secret, other people don't know she's there. Yeah, so that's like a fun aspect of it, or it can be a fun aspect of it. So there's joys and happiness and humor to be found even now in this relationship, and I realize that can be really difficult, for people, especially in the beginning. But that's one of the great things about this group is that, and I guess it's kind of like an unexpected for me. I would, you and I got along really great, and we were able to joke and laugh about stuff, right? And what really kind of amazed me was how quickly people in our group who came to our group sort of regained their sense of humor,
Mm.
and are able to laugh and joke and play. And I just want everybody who's not in the group to know that in our group we share some of the darkest humor possible because because I would say that none of us have a fear of death, and we can share some pretty I think other people would be put off some by it, but we can share some pretty great jokes uh, with each other. That's to me, it's really surprising that I remember when one person in particular came to the group, and incredibly sad uh, story, tragic story, very sad. And I don't think that I was there initially when they got into the Zoom meetings, but the first time I saw it, this person came on when I started at the Zoom meeting when I came back, is I cracked this joke about death, you know, and it was something about our partners in death or whatever, and something, yeah, it's just something along the lines of, well, we're just watching my TV shows now. You don't get a vote. You're not here, and you can't stop me. something along those lines. And she cracked up laughing. And I could see from the look on her face that it was surprising to her that she was laughing about it. And that's something that I really appreciate this group about is like other people outside of the group may think that it's real somber and real grief filled. And we do have those moments and we honor those moments. We treat them appropriately. But a lot of how we act is a lot of good natured ribbing and fun and good natured humor and jokes. And it could get, it can get pretty dark sometimes, but people appreciate it. And that's really like a revelation because I haven't seen that anywhere else. I mean, it's like even in like I used to regularly go to what were more spiritually oriented groups, and it was all so serious, and it was also I don't know what you'd call it. It was just so serious. But in our group, there's a lot of humor and a lot of good times and a lot of fun. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I think that the topic of death is difficult for a lot of people, and people still don't know quite how, like, in other words, if you're talking to somebody that you don't know, and in our group, we have new people come in all the time. We don't know them, and you don't want to say something that I'll speak for myself. I don't want to say something that would ever be hurtful to anybody. Inadvertently, of course, I've done that. But uh, at the same time, I always go back to this thing that again Abraham says, and I've said this a million times, so forgive me, but this is something that's really stuck with me, that when you're walking down the street with a friend and the friend falls in a ditch, meanwhile, that's the openly grieving person. It doesn't help them if you if you jump in the ditch after them. And it's better if if you stay where you are and hold a hand out to them and help them up. And so I don't want the humor to be offensive to anybody. On the other hand, it's helpful to see, I think it's helpful. I would like to believe it's helpful for people new to grief, especially, to see that there is love and laughter beyond the grief. And I've said before in this group that in our meetings here and in our Zoom group that I am a member of different grief groups, and I don't use generally comment. I just read what other people write, and it's so different from our group. Again, this is not judgmental, but it's just that people will say, my husband died and I'm so lonely, and when does this end? When does the pain end? And person after person after person will say it never does. You never, you just learn to live with it. And I'm thinking, oh man, there's a whole other way. There's a whole other way. And yes, I miss Paul. I do miss him. And there are tender moments where I think, oh, Paul. But it's not the grief of the beginning in the beginning stages that was so emotionally and physically crippling. It's not like that. And there's a lot of love and joy I feel like the luckiest person in the world. And when people say, um, I don't know, if I meet somebody new and tell them a little bit about myself, I'll say, yeah, well, I live with my husband. He's in heaven. I say heaven because that's kind of a universally acceptable kind of term, and people they don't argue with you about that. And I'm not really open to arguing too much. So I'll say, well, he's in heaven, but we're together. And they go, oh, I'm so sorry. I said, no, 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 no reason to be sorry. I'm the luckiest woman. I'm the luckiest person in the universe, really. I have the love of my life. We're together. We'll be together forever. And then I list other things. I have two beautiful, healthy children who I love. And, I'm super, super, super fortunate. And that's another thing that I do every day when I am disciplined enough to do this. In the morning, I dance around to that music, celebrate good times, except I make up my own lyrics. And then after that, I have a little journal and I write 5 things that I'm appreciative of. And of course, every time I always start with, I love you, Paul. I love you. I love you. Thank you for loving me. I love you. I love you. I love you. I never get tired of that. Um, Thank you for being my husband. I can't believe we came together after 35. That's the first entry. Then I can be thankful for, my kids or just other things. We've talked about this, William, cup of hot coffee, a nice weather day out. I can take a walk or, a book I'm reading. I don't know. There's a billion things to be appreciative for. So, uh, I lost my way with this. I forgot what we were talking about. I guess we're talking about the nature of this group. And the nature of this group is if you can come into this group and heavily grieve from day one until the day you pass. You can. We've had people actually pass in this group who never really recovered on this side, but they'll be reunited with their sweethearts. They get the prize. William always says it's the romance lottery. We've all won the romance lottery, and they're going to collect their prize too. So it doesn't really matter if you grieve heavily, if that's your story, and some people are more comfortable with that anyway. They're not comfortable with feeling better. They feel better feeling a little bit sad, and that's fine. There's
Yeah, that's something we completely accept in the group. And I think the nature of the group is that we're just very supportive, and we all realize that we all have our own way of dealing with this and going through it. And it's really just an amazing group. I've never really seen anything like this group. And when I say that, we have some taken out of context out of this group, some of our humor probably wouldn't land very well with other people. But we've kind of gotten to know each other quite a bit, and we know that we've all been through this. We've all have gone through this pain, this horrible pain. We all deeply love our spouses. We all care for each other, and that we know that, you know, whenever somebody says something or does something or whatever, it's not like it's we always interpret it in the best possible light, and uh, accepting that different people have different ways of expressing themselves. Uh, there are people in the group who express their grief and their let's say, real dislike of this world, quite often, and lament their situation, and that's fine. We never diminish that. We never. It's not about trying to get them to change for the group. They're perfectly welcome in the group. They're respected in the group, and they accept us. They accept that we may be in a different place than them, and well, I hope they do anyway. They could be secretly holding grudges for all I know, but but that we're just that we're just different people, and we're going through this differently at different stages, and we just give each other that, and that's really what a remarkable group to have. Let me see, we got a comment here. Yeah, that's yeah. I think that there are people who are more comfortable being in grief. Uh, that it's because I'll just take it from my own experience. I had trouble getting outside of grief because there was a part of me that felt like it meant I was losing my connection to Irene, and that I was more taking her for granted, or the love was diminishing, and so it would have been really comfortable, I think, for me to just get the pain to a certain point and uh, not push it. Another thing that I was afraid of was I would get to a point where the pain was more manageable than it had been before, and I was a little bit better, and I'd be scared to do anything, to upset that position that I had acquired. I said, well, this is good enough. I can live the rest of my life in this much pain, and I don't, I would be afraid to push it any further because I didn't want to feel disconnected from Irene. I didn't really know how to navigate that. How do I navigate the grief subsiding and it not I had no framework for understanding how that would work, and it not mean I loved her less, and it not mean that uh, our relationship was fading. You know, I had no way of doing it, and I was just really fortunate, you know, for Irene to have stepped in when I was trying to write that letter to her and say, "You don't have to be in pain to show me that you love me." It's like, and I realized, well, not being in grief wasn't an issue when she was alive. You know, being in pain wasn't a prerequisite for our enjoyable, very loving, very deeply loving relationship when she was alive. And then after that, it just kind of seemed kind of weird to me that I had ever been afraid of that in the first place, because it wasn't a prerequisite for our life here together, you know, and our love together. And it wasn't necessary for us to have a very deep and meaningful and intimate relationship because neither of us were in grief, you know. So yeah, yeah, I don't think there's an issue with feeling grief. There's not an issue with how anybody goes through this. And I've told you before, Mary Beth, is I never want to lose the capacity to access that grief, because
Mm,
I think it was an extremely important experience.
yes.
It's actually become a very treasured experience that I went through. I wouldn't trade it for anything, because, as I said before, I think that that's the only way that you can have a full understanding of how much somebody means to you, is if you have them and you love them deeply and truly, and then they die, and then that grief is this huge absence of where they were. You know, this it's like every for me it was like everything. I became completely aware that what meant everything and what means everything to me is Irene, you know, and that's the only way I think a person could really come to fully understand that. What do you think?
Well, no, absolutely. And I know someone commented that, no one that they've never heard of anybody wanting to be in grief, but I have read in grief groups people say, I'm grieving, and people sometimes they'll reassure them. Mostly everybody just wants to tell their story about how bad it is for them. But I remember more than once I've read where people say, I always want to have some of the grief because it's the way to honor my wife or my husband or and I didn't, because of Abraham, I wasn't thinking of it in those terms ever. And, but, that's them. They're entitled to do things their own way. The other thing I've learned from you, William, that has really been more recent, it's not as personal as what we're talking about, but just in general. Let me go back to the beginning. When Paul died, I, like many, many, many people, probably most people, began to learn about the afterlife, actively, like dive into it and read books about it. And I went to, I had readings and I went to gatherings and I went to psychic fairs. And I mean, I was all over the place doing stuff. I took a cruise. I took a cruise with James in Prague and Tony Stockwell in a European cruise. I could not get enough of, learning about this stuff. And along the way, if you read enough stuff, you're going to run into things that are disturbing to you. It doesn't matter what you believe, there's going to be things that are counter to what you believe. And it's like, well, what do I do with that information? And sometimes the information that comes through that's upsetting to you is from a source that up until that moment you liked, you believed, and you trusted. And like, oh no, wait a minute, what? No. And that's very upsetting. But I love what you said in more recent times. What you have said is that all of that exists. All of that exists. And so if people are comforted by something or a condition sounds desirable to them, they can have that. But it doesn't mean everybody has to have that. And isn't that the way it is here as well? Right? Here on earth. And so that was comforting to me because then, in other words, what I'm trying to say is if you're following someone and reading something and you come across something that's especially egregious to you or upsetting, or can set up some sort of panic in you, which happened to me, then you can say, well, that that information is not for me and Paul. That's for other people. Other people might be encouraged by that and might like that idea. Uh, for example, many spiritual groups will say that when we die, we give up our human attachments to anybody, our human love. This is just a temporary thing, and we go to dwell with God. And I've told this story before. I won't go tell the whole story, but when I was about 10 years old on Christmas Day, the priest I was Catholic, and the priest at Mass said that the purpose of Christmas is to remind us that I don't know where he got this from, but someday we will die. And if we die without sin on our soul, we will get to gaze upon the face of God for all of eternity. And I remember thinking at 10 years old, I love you, God, but I don't really want to gaze upon your face for all of eternity. I want to play with my brand new Barbie doll. And so, but there are spiritual groups that will say that we all become one. There's a dissolution. Our individuality dissolves and we're all one. And that's exciting for some people. That's horrific for me. I don't want that to happen. And so your notion of, hey, the people who want to dissolve and be with God, go be with God. That's fine for them. But it doesn't have to apply to every single person, every single one of us. And that was very exciting to me because I didn't have to judge the things that didn't resonate with me. I didn't have to think of them as horrible. I just thought of them as they're for other people. They're not for me. They're not for Paul and me. And so
Right.
that was one.
Yeah, it's something that people can experience, and people could go down that road if they want to and experience that thing. I was recently in a discussion on Reddit, and somebody was asking me uh, something about what most people in the afterlife. I think it was about reincarnation and about life reviews and what do most people in the afterlife experience. I thought about that for a while, and I thought, well, there's really no way for anybody to say what most people in the afterlife experience. Who the hell knows? You'd have to be omniscient to be able to make that evaluation. And so I reframed that in my response to it because these are people who are worried about what they are going to have to experience or what they are most likely to experience, blah blah blah. And I said, I just reframed that as I think it's better to think about this in terms of some people. And from the afterlife information, some people apparently experience life reviews. Some people apparently experience reincarnation. Some people apparently experience dissolution of ego. And some people experience all sorts. Some people experience a prison planet. Some people experience all types of stuff, you know. But as long as the information says, which it does, that some people, really quite a number of people from the afterlife information, experience this. They die, and they are either immediately or very quickly with the people they love who have crossed over. And some people can live a perfectly normal life with the people they love in a very wonderful and beautiful situation as long as they want to. Okay. It doesn't have to apply to most people. It doesn't have to apply to everybody, but that's what the information shows. That, like, well, I go back to what you said about you finding the Annie Nanji tapes. And you said, if there's one person in the afterlife who can maintain this relationship and maintain this love, okay, and it be like Annie Nanji was describing it, then that leaves the door open for you to have that experience and for you to do that. It doesn't matter what everybody else is doing, what everybody else believes. Do you hear a knocking? Okay, good. Somebody's hammering on my wall. Uh, it doesn't matter. You, it just seems so weird to me now to think of the afterlife in terms that it's one way for everybody, that everybody is going to experience the same thing, That just seems so strange to me now. That's such a strange concept to think that, I mean, we don't experience that here in this world. We have incredibly diverse experiences and beliefs and views and things that people do, and just incredibly diverse. Why would it be less diverse in the afterlife? That doesn't make any sense to me. We're all like becoming individuals here in this world. And so we're going to die and be stripped of our individuality. Well, if that's what you want, if that's what your thing, I'm sure that's available to you, but good. Don't try to force that on the rest of us. That's not going to fly. But, it's, to me, it's just much better to think of the afterlife and what your experience can be when you die as there's all sorts of diverse things and they're available to you. And it's not so much, you don't have to fearfully wonder what's going to happen to you. You can just focus on and direct yourself as best you can towards what you love, and I don't think you really even have to do that. We just, premiered a video yesterday. I think your inner nature is already doing that for you. It's already directing you to where it is the most fulfilling in your heart to be when you die. So,
Yeah, no, that's the whole thing with Abraham. That's why Abraham says to feel better, because that connection to the stream of love and everything you want and all that, that's always there. But if you are worrisome, or everybody worries, but anyway, uh the better you feel, the better connected you are to that. And it was true for me. I found that the better I felt, I've told this before too, that I'm not doing it so much now, but I used to do library programs with puppets, and I love doing them. And I would leave the school or the library where I was feeling like flying high as a kite. I like being with little kids. I like telling stories. I really love that stuff. And the minute I would, and I also like when a program's finished, like, oh, okay, done for the day. And I'd be in my car and I would just feel Paul with me because I was flying high as a kite. So that's really a really great feeling to have. The other thing I want to go back to for a second is we talked about, physical signs that people get early on when their loved one, most typically, not everybody, but most typically people get signs, a lot of physical signs early on, and sometimes they can tend to taper off, right? That they can
right.
they can fade. And you said that's when you jumped in and said that wonderful thing about, well, it's a two-way relationship. Relationships are two-way streets, and so you give them signs. You start, you know, putting a little energy into it and give them signs. And it can be, like you said, very small things. But um, I also wanted to add, I meant to add it back then when we were talking about it, and the conversation kind of took a turn. I just meant to add that what Patrick Matthews talks about, he talked about that in I don't know, they every so often they have a podcast thing, he and his sister Kathy. And he said that people complain about that the physical signs tend to wane after a while. And what does that mean? Does that mean my loved one went away? And he said, it doesn't mean that at all. But what he said is that it's an invitation to go deeper within. And I liked what he said about that it's less about, as you said, William, less about the stuff and more about the love. And that's what's especially beautiful. If you can hold this relationship in you and not be, for me, again, external signs are great. I still get medium readings, so that's an external thing. But when you can hold it, no matter if you get a sign or not, and still know that their presence is with you, that's a really wonderful thing. And Abraham has said that when Jerry died, Esther, who help me, William, what's the word?
Channel?
Thank you. When Esther Hicks, who channels Abraham, when her husband Jerry died, uh, Abraham said to her that, now Esther's, or said about her, Esther's relationship with Jerry now is even better than when he was physically focused. And I remember listening to that and thinking, well, I don't know how my life could be better without Paul physically focused. My relationship with him be better than without him physically focused. But I'll try. And so, that's what I aim for. Now, I still long for the complete, the whole enchilada. I still look forward to the complete, great grand romantic reunion that Paul and I are going to have because this is not enough. I want more. I want the whole thing. But in some ways, it is, in fact, even better just for the sake that it's gone on this long and it has not diminished, but it's increased. People worry that their memories will fade and that they will, time will go on and it'll get fuzzy and they won't be able to remember things or conjure up that feeling of connection and romance and all that. But I found it's not that, it's the opposite. It's more vivid than ever. How about you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like I said, the initial thing that happens that happened, I'll just speak for myself. When Irene died, is my face was absolutely shoved in how much I loved her. It was like, my wife and Irene and I, would very often just kind of look at each other and say, "Can you believe it's gotten even better? That we love each other even more. How's that even possible?" And at various times we think, "How is it even possible that we're more in love?" As time goes by, and it's really that I don't know. It's I think part of it is that the more you go through with people with this person that you love the most and see each other under very trying circumstances or under difficult circumstances. You and Paul were separated for, 30 for what, 35 years, something like that. And when you got together, it was like brand new. It was like just like it was in the beginning. When you find something like that out, when you go through that, which I know was a trying period to varying degrees for you, it's like that's a wonderful thing to find out. It's a wonderful thing to find out that your person, loves you this much, that they love you as much as you love them, and you are as meaningful to them as they are to you, and that they will stick it out through hard times with you, or they will persevere, and that just adds so much to the relationship. It adds so much depth to it. I don't know how else you could do it, how else you could find that out. It's like you're saying is that's one of the ways that this becomes even more precious to me. It has become so much more precious to me, you know, knowing without a doubt that she is my person, that I am her person, and that our love, just the fact, I think you were saying, just the fact that it is continuing to survive and thrive, and that she continues to mean this much to me, and she continues to be my everything. Just it's just adds it grows it. It's like it's becoming even more, I don't know, uh powerful and deep and meaningful. And I really wouldn't I wouldn't want to go without this experience. It's really an amazing kind of thing to go through, to realize, you know, when I first met Irene, I didn't even know I could feel that way about her about anybody when I first met them. I didn't know that was possible. Didn't feel that for my first two wives, you know. So it was like, holy crap, what is this? And then as time went by, it was a continuing sequence of what is going on. This is crazy. It's like I'm living in some alternate reality or something. And to get to this to get to this and to realize this is very rare, and very few people uh even start this part of the journey, will even contemplate even starting this part of the journey, where they continue in their committed, loving relationship with their partner. Uh, that's an amazing thing. To find out about myself that I love this woman so much and she means so much to me that I I have no thought of, and it makes me sick to think of being with somebody else. There's nobody else that could possibly do, and even the idea of starting that kind of relationship with somebody else is just horrible to me. It feels like I didn't know I was capable of having this type of devotion to somebody. I didn't know I was capable of loving somebody this much and them mattering to me so much that that this situation and what I'm doing here would be like it's turned into the joy of my life. I am so happy. How can this make me happy? It's like, how can it possibly make somebody happy to be alone the rest of their life? How can it possibly make somebody happy to resign themselves to never having another person in their life and blah blah blah? It's like it does make me happy. It's the only thing that makes me happy. you know, is is I've said this before, is I am so excited and happy and full of, oh, I don't even know what to call it, that I get to be that guy for Irene. Oh my God, I get to be that guy for Irene. I wouldn't abuse that or trade that in for any. You could offer me all the beautiful women in the world. No, that doesn't even come close. To me being able to have the opportunity to be this person for her. You know, that means everything to me. Did I
I
say that?
remember, I remember you said, William, I'm sorry for interrupting you.
No,
I'm
go
going
ahead.
but I'm going to anyway. I remember um, you saying early on, I don't know if you still feel this way, but early on, I remember you saying that, look, when we die, it's one of two things. Either I'm going to die and or close my eyes here and wake up over there in Irene's arms, or I'm going to close my eyes and that's it. And then it won't matter. And I want to live my life from now until the day I close my eyes in love with my wife and knowing that she's with me. And that's exactly the way I felt. It wasn't even a choice for me. It was like, why would I want anybody else? I have the most perfectly wonderful, gorgeous romance that I wanted my whole entire life. I used to say to Paul and I would marvel at that as well because we got along so well. And I remember saying to him at one point, I remember exactly where I was in our Manx bank. We lived in a bank building. And I remember where I was, and I just said, can you believe that this happened to us? It's so easy. And he said, this is the happy ending, baby. Like a fairy tale kind of thing, like that.
Oh,
I wish he had said happily ever after. We've had talks about that after, though. He said that's what I meant. I meant happily ever after. But yeah, he didn't, I remember when Paul said to me when we first connected online, way before Facebook, let's go back over 20 years ago. And we had connected online and in an online venue called Classmates, where different schools would have their own little, I don't know, their own little gathering on this bigger platform. And he and I had gone to the same school, and so I saw his name and my heart leapt. We started communicating like that. But his Paul's ex-wife is a lovely person, and just so is my ex-husband, by the way. Two lovely people can come together and really care for each other, but it's still not the same thing,
yep.
right? Yeah,
Oh yeah.
I
Yeah,
don't want I don't
absolutely.
want to speak ill about, or I don't want to speak about anybody, out of context. I don't want to say the wrong thing. So I'm choosing my words carefully. But all I'm saying is that I've been in more than one marriage. I've been in three marriages, and my first two husbands were perfectly lovely people. but it wasn't this.
Yeah, yeah, and this is, we've talked about this in the group, but this is beyond. I mean, I'll just speak frankly here. I mean, if people get their feelings hurt, mm, I'm not that considerate. This is beyond anything. I mean, I've got children, I've got parents, I've had two ex-wives, I've got two ex-wives, I've got grandchildren, I've got great grandchildren. Uh, none of that is even close to what I feel for Irene. None of that is even close to what I feel for Irene. It's just a whole different thing. We were talking about this in chat, I think, earlier. This is something beyond all that. This is like like every possible great relationship quality rolled into one relationship with one person. You know, best friends, lovers, ride or die. Person who's always got your back. There's a sense of satisfaction and completion and being home. Of safety and intimacy and being heard and being appreciated and being valued. I mean, being respected. It's all the things. It's all the things, and it goes. The word love doesn't even do it justice. It's not even close. Uh, and I was talking about that I get to be that guy for Irene. Like these, I've said this before. These are like great love stories. And we all in this group get to be, part of one of the protagonists, in this great love story that we're writing with our partners. But I just want to, you know, put the shoe on the other foot a little bit. That is, what would it mean to me if I died and I saw my wife going through all of this for me,
Mm.
going through all of this to hold on to the relationship, to continue the relationship, to express her love for me, to you know be devoted to me. My God, that's got to be the most, I'm not trying to toot my horn for doing it from this end, but when I put myself on the other side of this and think about what it would mean to me, and I'm not, Irene has done a crazy good job of interacting with me, communicating with me, giving me signs, giving me validations and confirmations. And it's still difficult for me to really apprehend uh, that idea of what it means to somebody. It means a lot to me, but I think from their perspective, because we're the ones who go through the serious grief and the serious disconnect and the ongoing, panic attacks and misery and despair and have to suffer all the slings and arrows. I'm not aware that of what all they have to do. I'm not aware of all that they have to go through. I'm not aware directly. I assume that they have to endure people around them or figures of authority telling them it's not a good idea. You shouldn't be doing this. You know, you should let them go. You've got your spiritual progression to think about, you know, or or they're gonna move on. You need to leave them alone. I'm talking about people on the other side. You know, I'm not that aware of her pain. I'm not aware of that aware of her sadness, but she is starkly aware of mine. She can see me, she can feel me, she can do all that. There's not really the same degree of veil between from her side that there is from my side. So I've got to think that's that what we're doing here is is of a magnitude of love that just cannot be matched anywhere that we're expressing for our partners by doing this. And they get to feel all that. They get to feel how much we miss them, how much we mean to them. You know, they get to feel how much from our how much they mean to us. They get to feel how much we love them. They get to see what we're doing to preserve that relationship and to hold on to them and to hold on to that relationship going forward. They get to see us like excited about being with them again, like on a daily basis, counting the days, counting the moments now to when we get to be with them again. I've got to think, I if I was on that side over there, where else would I be? Where else would I want to be? Who else would I want to possibly be with except here, except with this person? Yeah. Am I making any type of sense, Mary Beth?
Yes, no, that's like what Stuart White said when his wife Betty, not the actress, but his wife Betty White died, and a friend of theirs was metaphysically talented and channeled his wife to him, and he said something to her like, "Well, when I die, well, how will I know where you are? Where are you?" And she said, "I'm with you always. Where else would I be?"
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. And I dearly love my children. I love my ex-husband. He is a lovely, wonderful partner, and I've been to her house for. I'm all about let's all get along, and I appreciate all the relationships for what they are. But Paul's my primary relationship, and I talk to my kids about it, and they agree that uh, when they have relationships, that person is their prime and focus. And so that's something also that I learned. Abraham says we're not here to learn anything, that we're here for the experience of it. And I think this is just me thinking. I think we're here to appreciate all of it. And William, again, I learned this from you. In even in there's things wanted and unwanted. Of course, it's easy to appreciate the wanted things, but in the unwanted circumstances, there are always gifts. And before I even met you, William, I knew on the journey that Paul had with cancer, we purposefully looked for the gifts, the kindness that people showed us, and the medical people who helped, and the fact that it brought us even closer together. Right before he died, that's what Paul said. I think this whole thing brought us even closer together than ever. And then after he died, of course, I was thrown into that pit of hell, like everybody, just in agony. But I continued to try to find the gifts. And you reinforce that by saying that even in the unwanted, I certainly to this moment I didn't want Paul to have cancer and die. I did who would want that? I certainly didn't want that, but there are gifts in it. And the biggest gift of the grief is that it as you said, exposes the depth of our love for our person. I thought I loved Paul more than any human could love another before he got cancer. Then he got cancer and I loved him even more. And then he died and I loved him even more. It was just deeper and deeper. It just seems eternal. Maybe that's what eternal means. And
Yeah.
it's eternal. And and so now it's for us, it's more about the love and way less about any pain. I do miss him, and it's sweet that Paul would miss me too, but I'm not in agony, and I just really totally thoroughly enjoy the heck out of this relationship. Just it's so marvelous. And I feel like not only did I discover Paul and the divine intervention brought us together again, but I'm happy. I don't mean to sound superior sounding, but I didn't want I was not interested in crossing myself over, and I did not want to look out on a life of pain, that searing, searing grief. I thought it was going to kill me. That's one of the reasons that, Patrick Matthews is an expensive medium, and I don't have a lot of money, but I thought I have to get some help or I'm going to get cancer because it was so painful all the time and it never went away. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and it would be there. It was there all day long. It was exhausting. And I thought, I can't live like this. And so I trusted Abraham because I was like, a little weak kitten. I had to get help from somewhere. And I trusted Abraham and went to found the sources that were supportive of me.
And you went to Patrick Matthews.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And yeah, and so that's
I had a reading by him, and then I traveled 3 times. I don't think they do them anymore, but they used to have these gatherings in Virginia. Patrick and his sister Kathy are very close, and they grew up in Virginia, but now they live in California. And at the time, after Paul died, they had these gatherings in Virginia, and I would get myself on a plane and get down to Virginia, and it would be a one-day thing, and everybody, it would be small, 15 people, and everybody would get a little reading. And then in the second half of the day, they would do like, different little exercises to prove that you could connect with people on the other side, that you could do it yourself without a medium. And I went to all of them and I really benefited from all of them.
yeah, and that helps support it. And what you were talking about is the I felt the same way about the grief. I mean, I couldn't live with it. I just could not live with that type of ongoing, relentless agony. Good God, it was awful. And then here's the thing, and this is one of the beautiful things about it is that those of us in this group, we were not dissuaded from this path by the grief. You know, it was we had to find a way. You know, that's why everybody is in this group. You know, they were desperately, usually trying to find a way to maintain their relationship, even though the grief was just hammering them. You know, and that's that to me, that's a lot of the people that I see on Reddit and other groups is they turn to other relationships because of the grief and loneliness, you know, and they're looking to be, you know, I don't mean to like dismiss it, but either distracted from their pain and their grief and their loneliness, or find some way to just get out of it. And I don't mean that in a negative sense, but it's the that's the only way that they can see forward to get relief.
Yeah.
And doing it this way is is really a big leap of faith, and it's a big leap of commitment, and it's a big statement about that this is your person, that nobody else will do, that I have to have this person. I can't replace this person. There's no substitute for this person that isn't just going to cause me even more anguish and even more pain and even more disquiet and regret and guilt and whatever. It's because nobody else will do. And I got to say that this is especially when, you know, when this group started, this, this is an extremely brave choice to make, you know, because not only is it about the emotional and the psychological, but it's a tough physical road to go down, you know, because 99% of this group is women, right? And I'm not being, I don't think anybody will take me as being sexist here, but when you don't have the guy to pick up the heavy stuff or to haul the heavy stuff or to do certain things or to feel protected by or to share the load as far as, you know, money, or to carry the load as far as the money in some situations, you know, or to make you feel safe at night in your own home. This is a hard ass road to go down for most people. I mean, it's full of, you know, yeah. I mean, I'm just top. I've got four daughters and, you know, grown daughters. I've got several grown grandchildren, daughters, granddaughters, and this is this world is difficult enough, and it's you're always trying to be taken advantage of, and you're always under some type of predatory lens for a lot of places and a lot of your life, especially the well, I'm not even gonna say especially the younger ones. We've heard the stories. Yeah, we have heard the stories about life as a widow who is not interested in repartnering. It's freaking tough. It's hard, especially if you don't have children. If you don't have children, I mean, it's just hard. And this is an incredibly, I'm going to say courageous, but it's just an exhibition of love beyond anything else, right? That you're willing to brave the rest of your life in this world, essentially physically alone, you know, and do it out of your love and commitment to your partner. That's just phenomenal. It's mind boggling to me. I am in awe of that. You know, it's unbelievable. And if you think that our partners don't recognize this, they do. They understand how difficult this is for us. They can see how difficult it is, and it's all the more meaningful to them. You know that we're choosing this. I hope I've made sense without making myself too much of an awful patriarchal sounding person. I'm sorry, but I have been taught great understanding by the women in this group about how difficult it is.
No, that's true, William. And also about repartnering, of course, there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. And I don't bring any judgment to it. It's not my choice. But, if people are some to be fair, some people have great loves, and then I don't understand the psychology, but some people say that they've had great loves and that but they still have more love, and so they repartner and they're happy in the second partnering. Okay, and that's their story, and I don't quite get how that works, but that's up to them. But there are also many people who, in these grief groups I read about, that their partner passes, and literally within a matter of weeks, they're saying, do you think I should, to the people in the group who they don't know, do you think I should date again? And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I could barely take a shower. And how is it that but I've known people personally who had from the outside looking in, very happy, successful, long marriage, decades long marriages, and their partner died and they did indeed repartner. And how successful or happy that is, I don't know. They're not telling me about it, so that's okay. But I do think that sometimes some people look to repartnering for the relief because the grief is it's so crippling. It's staggering. It was shocking to when Paul being sick, especially toward the end, when all hope was lost, I had enough time to realize he was dying. It wasn't 2 seconds. He was not going to get better. And still when he died, it was shocking to me. I think I was in shock for a while, literal shock for a while. And I couldn't, I couldn't believe how painful it was. His illness in no way prepared me for his death. Not at all. Not even a little tiny bit. And it was unlivable. I really, to be honest, I don't want to say the wrong thing, but I can understand why somebody would want to cross themselves over because it's so unbearable. I'm not encouraging anybody, and I don't want to say anything untoward, but it's a horrible thing to go through. But to get through it is glorious. To
Yeah,
realize that there's a love affair with your person who went ahead of you on the other side of grief, that's fabulous.
yeah, and you
That's fabulous.
really the before this group. I mean, I don't know how Betty White did it. I mean, I don't know. She's like an icon for us. Oh my gosh, how did you do that?
Oh, you mean
Uh,
Beth, the actress,
yeah, Betty White, the actress. Yeah,
Stewart wife's wife.
you're right, right, right. Alan Ludden was her
Yes.
soulmate.
Not to
And,
confuse petty white people. Yeah.
right, right, right. So I just want to say if I hope you guys realize that our partners are on the other side going, look at this, look at this, look how much she loves me, you know, Look how much he loves me. Oh my God. Can you believe it? They're grabbing people by their collar and say, look at this. And this, I don't mean to put it this way, but it's like, there's got to be other people around going, oh my God, I wish I had somebody that loved me like that. Oh my God. I think we're the ones living it. Oh my God, it's so sweet. It's
You
so
know,
beautiful.
you know what struck me? You know, all those kind of take my wife jokes,
Hmm.
you know, take my wife, you can have her kind of joke. They all seem so tremendously out of step. I mean, of course, they're old-fashioned jokes and everything to begin with, but it's like, why would you stay with somebody that you really loathe or you can't stand or I mean, I realize there's a lot of reasons people stay in relationships, and I'm not you know, a psychologist or anything like that. I shouldn't comment on anything, but I just think I'm scratching my head going, wow, if you really despise the person you're with, why you're making jokes, I don't know. And sometimes people make jokes and it's just a joke. But it's I don't know. The only other time I heard about these kinds of relationships were in Disney movies.
Yeah, yeah. And it's just like, I don't know, for me, I know for you that that's what you wanted, right? You had your mind set on big love.
Big
And,
love. That's
yeah,
what big
and,
love.
and and for me, and it's just like I have another perspective. My perspective is I didn't think they were real. I thought it was just something people made up in love stories and for Hallmark cards, and I was like, and so it was like astounding to me to find myself in that type of love with Irene, uh, almost right from the get go. I mean, before I really even knew anything about her or knew had time to figure out her personality or understand her any whatever it was. It was like something on a much deeper level just opened up in me, and I was like, I've never experienced anything close to that ever before in my life, and it shocked me. And I just this is a really amazing thing to I can't believe it. It's just it's like you want to pinch yourself, and go, is this real? Am I really like in a straitjacket in an asylum somewhere, just having a big old delusion or something? I can't believe, and I'm so fortunate, so lucky to have met her, and for her to feel the same way about me, and for us to have the time together that we have and to go through everything that we went through. And I am so fortunate to have had, just like you and I have talked about our fortunate circumstances when this happened to us.
Yeah.
When both in how we approach their sickness and how we approach their death afterwards. And we were just so unbelievably fortunate in that. We were unbelievably fortunate to have met, for you and I to have met at all. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a pretty wild type of coincidence, you know.
Yeah, because you were a guy in largely a group of women. It was a group of, except for William, I think, women who did want to remain in the relationship with their partners who had passed. Uh, so they had that element that I agreed with. But what happened was that William started talking about how he was feeling better and better, and that didn't fly with them. They didn't believe that you could stay in the relationship and feel better. But of course, I was on my feel better path as well. So I thought, well, I really resonate with this guy. And I talked to my sister about it on the phone. I said, I don't know if I belong in that other group. I don't know what to do. And she said, well, why don't you why don't you just, go ahead and
Start your own group.
oh, but what did no, but what did she say? She said,
She said it sounds like it's time to move on.
Yes, thank you. She said, "Oh, my brain is not working." Yes, that was it. And it was ironic because that's exactly the thing we don't want to hear. But she said, "Mary Beth, why don't you move on?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "Start your own group." And then I connected with, and then I DM'd William. But I didn't, we had no, we've never met in person ever still. But we clicked right away because we had, similar goals for ourselves, which is to really be as close as we could to our sweethearts and to demonstrate our love to them as much as possible.
Yeah, and I want to add to that that guys, when I at least when I think Mary Beth had expressed this before about she didn't know that she could, you know, feel even better about her relationship with Paul than when he was. It seemed like a pretty lofty goal to reach. I had no hope whatsoever that I was not going to be in pain, even though I had used all of these psychological methods and reprogramming and all those methods, and even though I was a big like anti-authoritarian, I wasn't going to take no for an answer. My barest hope, my highest hope when I started this was that I could just get to a point where I could manage the pain. That's all. That's all I thought. Because I thought there's no getting over this. There's no getting over this. There's no way to laugh again. There's no way to be happy again. There's no way I can enjoy music again. There's no way I can even watch a show anymore and care anything about it. I can't eat and enjoy it. I can't sleep and enjoy it. Nothing was enjoyable. It was all painful. It was all miserable. And I was just because I had like a few days of not feeling absolutely horrible right after she died, before the grief hit me like a train. I at least had this glimmer of hope. I was still in pain that time, but it was manageable. But then the grief hit, and it was like Mary Beth said, it just drags you along the track of pain, and there's no getting off of it. You can't get off of that. And so I was just trying to get to the point where I could, manage the pain for the rest of my natural life. And I had, Mary Beth said something about it before, but I had no intention of going the rest of my life in that kind of pain. That was not going to happen one way or another. Okay. I made plans. I actually made plans. I can't do this for very long. I'll do it as long as I can, but if this doesn't get better, I'm going to have to disappoint my children. But, and hurt their feelings. But, it astounded me. I was shocked when I realized I hadn't had that grief, that horrible, despairing grief in a while. How long has it been? And I had to go back and check my little journal that I was writing. I'm like, wow, it's been a couple of weeks. How is that even possible? And I thought, because every time before that, I thought, okay, I've gotten over the hump now. The train would just start dragging me again. It would just start hitting me again. But this time, it had come back. And I thought, oh my God, I can't believe it. This is manageable. I can be in this much pain and this much sorrow and longing for Irene and still live the rest of my life, But that shocked me that I even got to that point. Was utterly shocking to me uh, that because I mean I couldn't believe it. I couldn't because I had no hope. I had no hope whatsoever that I could get it down even to that point.
Well, you were very active, William, because before you and I connected, the reason that the other admin in this other group, that by the way no longer exists, the other group does not exist anymore. Um, they were suspicious of you because you started writing in the group things like, I look back in my journal and I from the beginning to now I realize I've made progress and I'm starting to feel better. And you talked about how in your journal every day, I believe you can tell me if I'm wrong. You wrote to Irene or you expressed your love for her over and over again. And you were in effect and you did your affirmations and all that, and you were in effect reprogramming yourself, even if you didn't realize it at the moment. And it worked.
Yeah, no. I realized I was reprogramming myself. Uh, those are methods and techniques that I had long learned about how to manage my own psychology and overcome certain issues and limitations that I had. In my quest to be the best husband I could be for Irene, I used these techniques and these methods so I could be a better husband, a better man for her.
Right.
And the best man I could be for her. And so I immediately, right off the bat, turned to those techniques and those methods because I knew that. So the thing is I knew I already believed in the afterlife. At this time, I already believed in the afterlife consciously, but I knew I was reacting as if I didn't. I was reacting. My emotional and psychological reaction was the same as she's gone forever. I'll never see her again. I'll never hold her again. I'll never kiss her again. I'll never hear her voice again. That's how I was physically reacting. So I knew that subconsciously I was still programmed at a deep level to believe, as society does to us, that dead equals gone forever.
Yes.
And
That's what,
I had to reprogram that if I had any hope of being in less pain.
exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the
And
way it feels. That's the way it seems, but it's not true.
right. It's not true. And there's, some people have talked about on Reddit how, well, you basically just brainwash yourself into having a belief that's not true. Well, that would be an argument if there wasn't so much damn evidence. I mean, there's evidence and an incredible amount of evidence for all of this. And I know we're going a little bit over here.
I just want to,
Uh,
I just
yeah,
want to,
go ahead, Mary Beth. Bring us home.
I just want to add one little quick thing is that when you said earlier on, I talked about the fact that you said, I'm going to devote the rest of my life to Irene. And, if I close my eyes, I'll be in her arms, or I'll close my eyes and there'll be nothing, but I won't regret that. That's exactly the way I felt. You and I felt a lot of the very same things. I thought to myself, all right, I thought what you said made sense. And I even thought I went one step further and I thought if I close my eyes and I wake up on the other side, and well, one of my big worries, you have all the whack-a-mole worries all the time, is what if Paul on the other side, what if he met someone he loved even more than me? I know he loves me, but what if his true soul, I mean, I could, rip myself to with, it was like I took a razor blade to myself. And I thought, well, no matter what, even if I get over there, I also thought Paul may have reincarnated without me. And I thought a billion different worries. And I thought, if any of those things happen, it still doesn't matter. I still would not regret devoting my life now and forevermore to him. And he's not the boss of me. He cannot tell me I can't be in love with him. Not that he would, but you know what I mean? Like I was trying to think of the worst scenario, and no matter what, I was still in love with Paul. I was still in love with Paul for all the many years that we weren't in touch with each other, because the second we got in touch with each other, that all flooded back.
Yeah.
So it doesn't, so that's why that made me feel calm. Like it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what happened. It doesn't matter. This is what I'm choosing. This is what makes me feel happy. This is what makes me feel in love and loving. I get to be in love with Paul for forever, and no one can take that away from me.
Yeah. That's exactly how I feel. And that's it's shocking to me that we've gotten to this point. It's really shocking, when you take where we started and what that was like and where we are now. It is absolutely flabbergasting that that's possible. That was possible. That was even possible. So wherever you are on your journey, and like Mary Beth has already said now, whatever it's like for the rest of your journey, it doesn't have to be like us. It doesn't have to be like either Mary Beth's route, my route, anybody else's route. It's you have your own individual love story to tell and live out. And it's going to be beautiful. It's going to be what's right for you and your partner and your eternal paradise happily ever after. And I think that there's different routes that people need to take, individual routes that people need to take to get to their version of that, their version of their eternal happily ever after. And so we want to thank all the people who were here. I want to thank you, Mary Beth, for yet another nice 2 hour episode of
Thank you, William and Irene, too.
yeah. And we we'll see. Well, I'm sure we'll do this again at some point. So thank you all. Let me see if I can turn this off now. Okay.